Wonderful. Well, let's get started.
Okay.
So, I am here with Juanita Ingram, and I am so thrilled for this opportunity to talk with you and welcome you to the Women in the Law Fireside Talk. I
Thank
am
you.
sitting with an award-winning attorney, filmmaker, author, fashion philanthropist, and actress, and the newly crowned Mrs. Universe of 2022 and 2023. Welcome, 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 Juanita.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to chat with you as well. As I was getting to know you, you have such an impressive resume. I mean, the things that you have been participating in is just extraordinary. And I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about your journey and your profession as well as a woman lawyer.
Sure. I started the journey 21 years ago. It was interesting because I always wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was in the eighth grade, and then really solidified that desire when I participated in a mock trial team in high school. And I won Best Oral Advocate. But I always wanted to become a lawyer to help people. I am a first generation attorney in my family. So I started out University of Memphis is the law school that I attended. My undergrad degree is in accounting. So I always wanted to do both. I don't know what that was about, but it made sense because then I became a business lawyer. So it helped me. I did a JD MBA program dual in law school. And so that sort of started the journey here in Tennessee. I'm a licensed attorney in Tennessee, in Indianapolis, in Indiana. And I say here because I'm home visiting this summer. So I'm here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's where I started out. And yeah, at 21 years ago is where it all started for me. I started in practicing in a law firm in their commercial law department. So I did everything from nonprofit law, LLCs, business entities, real estate was a heavy item. I started in bankruptcy also, representing creditors. I did not enjoy that. I remember my first case was this guy trying to hide horses from the bankruptcy court. Maybe only in Tennessee would that happen. I don't know. I don't know how you planned on doing that. But I just remember going to Jackson, Tennessee, and having my first court case and winning. But I remember them calling me Little Missy in court. In court. So my journey has been interesting, but I've loved the journey. I've been in-house counsel. After that, we moved to Indianapolis. I took the bar exam again because I had only been practicing for 3 years, and there was no reciprocity. There wasn't enough time, so I had to take the entire bar exam again and pass it again. But I told my husband he only gets that once. I love him. I'm not sure I love him enough for another bar exam. Just saying. Um, but that journey in Indiana, I went to a law firm there and then started the in-house counsel journey, and ended up at Simon Property Group and then Rolls Royce. And then we moved abroad. And so that's when my identity sort of shifted. And I learned, there was that book that came out that everybody shared years ago, like all the things you can do with a law degree. And I probably could write that myself at this point. So really started doing the alternative aspects, utilizing my law degree in the entertainment space. So that's how that all came about.
Say more about that, about how your identity shifted, because I kind of feel that women lawyers, we tend to take on this identity, especially in a professional setting, in a way that we almost ignore our more personal embodiment,
Oh yes,
especially as a woman. So, can you share a little
yes.
bit more about how you shifted when you were
Mhm.
changing and moving abroad?
Absolutely. And, it was really that change and navigating that change has been sort of the inspiration for the books that I've written. But it took me on a journey. I remember I had two children by then. My son was 13 months old, my daughter was 3. I remember the sound of the gravel underneath the cars as my husband rolled out the driveway when he went to work, and I stood there, and it hit me for the first time that I wasn't, because so often we equate our self-worth, our identity with what it is that we do. And I'd always been Juanita the attorney. well, I'll say this, I'd always just given myself permission to be Juanita the attorney. I ignored the fact that I had been in theater since I was 9. I ignored the fact that I played 5 instruments. I ignored the fact that I had this super creative side, that I was an artist, that I painted, that I drew, that I had all of these things that were also me that I sort of ignored. You know, there are seasons for everything. And at one point, all I could do was be a first time new mom and a lawyer. And if I showered, I was winning. You know, that's all I could do. But in that moment um, of standing there with my 2 children and having never been a stay-at-home mom before, I had to search and say, okay, well, who is Juanita? I was still Juanita the attorney, even though I didn't know that I could give myself permission to be that in an alternative form, in the sense of not practicing in the traditional way that we practice law. But there were things that my law degree would enable me to do that were extremely fulfilling and were part of my overall purpose. The best thing that I did during that time, because I didn't even know what trailing spouse syndrome was. I had no idea what trailing spouse depression was. I had no idea until I started doing research for subject matters when I was producing my show. And I researched it and I was like, oh my God, so that's what that was in terms of identity. And the best thing that I did was investing in a life coach that helped me to redefine and almost discover the fullness and give myself permission to be Juanita the attorney, the author. That's where the 3-8 alliteration, because you know, people will assume that you are flighty, that you're having a midlife crisis, even though I was only, it's like in my early 30s at that time. I'm like, this isn't midlife. You haven't even started living yet. You're only 33 and now you haven't started yet. But people will sort of give you the narratives that there's something wrong if you choose to take a step back or take a step off the traditional path. So I got a life coach that helped me to really define, okay, who is Juanita and what all would you like to do? And how does having a law degree and all of this experience play into that? And what would you do if you could wake up and do what you really wanted to do? And so I went back to acting. I auditioned and got signed while I was in London. I was in front of the lens for a while. I had my first Best Actress nomination, and then it was time for us to move back to America for a period of time. And that's when I decided that I liked what I did. You know, I think statistically, and think a lot of people don't know this, lawyers make the best producers because we problem solve and we execute, and that's what producers do. We make programs happen, we make projects happen. And so I decided at that time, when we moved back, I was in-house counsel and assistant general counsel at a company. But I kept acting and I kept creating shows and creating content in my spare time. And then I created my production company. But that journey of giving myself permission to be Juanita and not just Juanita the attorney, but who all am I and what am I really, and what drives me. And so being a lawyer is part of that, but it's not the only part. And so that was a journey. I had to watch my friends become judges and extremely happy for them, like the people that I studied for the bar with, and understand that my journey was going to be different. And I think you have to give yourself permission to mourn what you thought it was going to be in order for you to fully embrace and then begin to celebrate what it actually can be. So I spent too much time holding on to the past. I tell people I wasted like the first 4 months we were in London. I wasted the first 4 months like crying and sitting on the couch thinking about, oh my gosh, what have I done? Because when you move abroad, the first thing you think is, oh, it's exciting, it's great. But when you are the trailing spouse and it's your husband or your partner that's leading, you can find yourself in a sort of an identity crisis and having to navigate that and say, okay, what does this really mean for me? I say I wasted time, but it was a process that you have to go through. But on the other side of that, it's been pure joy and bliss when I gave myself the permission first to be more than just what is traditionally thought of as an attorney. And then everybody else got it. And then it became great. And then it became cool to be a multi-hyphenate. And so, yeah, but you have to get it for yourself first. Then everyone else will catch on. And then if they don't, you don't care. because you're already in your sort of sweet spot vortex of happiness and living your truth. And yeah, it's very fulfilling.
It seems I love everything that you're saying because I study a lot of these things in my own personal journey as a woman lawyer and as an entrepreneur and
Mhm.
also as a creative as well. And you
Mhm.
really seem to find a beautiful, inclusive way of not just incorporating your masculine side, which is
Mhm.
the legal profession, doing, producing, that is very much masculine energy. And we all embody
Mhm.
the masculine and the
Yes.
feminine. But then you
Yes.
found this beautiful way of also incorporating the feminine energy, which is this creative spirit, which is this thinking outside of the box and nurturing the art and
Yes.
exploring and doing these things in a very feminine way. And, most lawyers, they find that women lawyers in the beginning, we're trying to
Mhm.
fit in that masculine, we got to produce, we got to do, we got to do. And then we hit this roadblock because we burn out or something in our
Mhm.
life shifts us into a new direction. And
Mhm.
some of us tend to go too far into the feminine where
Mhm.
we lose the progress and where we're going in our career. What would
Mhm.
you say, because you did mention a couple things of
Mhm.
getting some support with a life coach,
Yes.
getting some solo time in order for you to mourn your past um,
Mhm.
professional way of doing things to in order to
Mhm.
embrace the new way of doing things. What
Mhm.
other sort of characteristics or skills would you think would help women who are making that transition in learning how to balance more of the production and also the nurturing side of their feminine essence?
I think, because language is so important and narrative is so important, especially the internal dialogue that you have with yourself. I think we need, I mean, define feminine. I don't think that there necessarily has to be this strong bifurcation of masculine versus feminine, because I think it is, and with that comes the guilt, the shame of not being able to fully fulfill either one.
Mm,
Not that there isn't a define or a definition of what is traditionally thought to be that masculine energy or that feminine energy, but I think we are all just energy, period. Because when I think of femininity, I mean, what's more hardcore than creating? I mean, it's what women do, whether we are creating contracts, whether we are creating successes for our clients, we birth things out. That is the ultimate, to me, hardcore energy and the strength. I don't think that masculinity necessarily equates with strong. I think femininity is strength, and how we define femininity in our minds. And I understand what we're talking about, like general describing in terms of functioning, but it was interesting, and it's not that it's not a reality also, but I think when we give ourselves, again, the dialogue we have with ourselves. I remember when I had my daughter, and this was in 2008. I was in-house counsel at I well, I'll say it because you can see it on LinkedIn. I was in-house counsel at Simon Property Group, and that was during the time of the economic crisis. And I was in retail and real estate, and my entire department was downsized. And my manager at the time walked in and said, "Well, I'm putting you in the first wave because I really didn't appreciate that you had a daughter or that you had a child, that you chose this time to have a child. I don't think you have been here long enough." I've been there for like 3 years. And he was like, "I don't think you had been there long enough. You were supposed to be my protege. And I just felt like the ramp up period for you to return took a long time. And I was very disappointed in you for choosing to do that." And so I'm not trying to um, negate the realities of when we inject our femininity and our womanhood into our profession, that there aren't ramifications and hardcore sometimes issues that come about, because it is okay for us to be lawyers. It is not okay for us to be women, especially for some of us. And I found it very interesting at that time. And when we talk about intersectionality of being a Black woman in this particular profession, because it was okay. His daughter and I were the same age. She was also an attorney. She also had a child that year. He was not disappointed in her, but he was disappointed in me. So when my femininity, my womanhood was injected, it was okay for me to be the workhorse and I was your protege as long as I didn't inject my uterus into the equation. So there is a reality that exists in society that makes it hard. But I think one, uh, we have to, and it's interesting because I was just on a TED Talk audition about the power of inclusion and this idea of inclusion. And this goes beyond, again, the intersectionality of not only being Black, but also being a woman. And so for women in general, this idea of include me, include me, include me. And I think we have to shift the narrative to ask, where do I want to be included? Do I want to be included here? Is this the place that I actually want to be? And we have to start evaluating the environments that we sit ourselves in. The American Bar Association did a study. I remember when I first started practicing, like almost 20 years ago, and they did a study on why it is that Black women were not ascending to the ranks of partners in law firms and general counsel, and why we were not in the C-suite as lawyers. And they came up with this phrase, locker room, living room factor. And for Black women, there's no locker room factor. So we're not men, we don't relate, and there's a locker room factor for men, regardless of race. Like, you can talk about sports, you're going to talk about, football, whatever. Living room factor, though, I don't remind you of anybody that would sit in your living room, your mother, your sister. So there's, that relatability aspect. But when you talk about the idea of inclusiveness, how it impacts us, how we navigate through spaces, how we give ourselves permission, yet we have mortgages to pay. I think it really becomes critical now that we evaluate what spaces do we want to be included in, and who are we giving that power to, and taking that power back to evaluate what are the environments that I'm going to thrive in, and where do I want to work? How do I want to create that? I know for a fact, for me, as it stands right now, I will probably never work in another law firm or another company. I will always have my own practice. I don't mind being contracted in-house counsel. I did that for a while, but because of that intersectionality, and it is not worth the stress of office politics. It is not worth, to me, in giving myself permission to be healthy. I learned that through the peace that came from being my own boss. Now, we all answer to somebody. Ultimately, even if you have clients, we all answer to somebody, but it's the environment that we place ourselves in. And being abroad and taking that step back helped me to evaluate my own self-worth, and in honoring myself, making the decision on what environments that I would pursue that were optimal for me. I did extremely well in traditional practice of law. I still have people that are, when are you coming back to the States? When are are you interested in coming back? I'm not in that way, because what is best for me in terms of how I choose to honor my intersectionality and my existence, and how I show up in a space for myself, is the most critical part first. That is hard to balance when you have bills to pay. So, there's a process to get to that place, and that was the journey that I had to take.
I'm so proud of you, because it just seems like everything you're saying is very resonant with me. And I really acknowledge in you in that you chose to forge your own way in creating your own path forward as a woman, as a lawyer, as a creative, as an entrepreneur, as opposed to suffering in some way in a system that just wasn't really built for us. What would you like? And that takes a lot more courage, because the road of entrepreneurship is not for everybody. And I say that as an entrepreneur. And it requires almost a different set of skill sets versus being an employee and being part of a law firm. What advice would you give to women who are maybe looking for another path to forge, whether that be entrepreneurship, or women who are just starting out their career and seeing that there are alternatives besides going into a traditional law firm setting? What is some advice that you would give to them?
I am a huge proponent of getting a coach. I don't think that you should try to navigate it by yourself. there are people who specialize in this very thing, specifically for lawyers that help, because sometimes you don't know what you haven't seen, what you haven't experienced. It can be scary, it can be overwhelming. I think you don't have to go it alone. Again, being open to redefining what you consider to be feminine, what you consider to be masculine, and the ramifications of that definition. So, is masculine positive and feminine is negative? You have to unpack those ideologies that you're holding within your own self and have someone help you to navigate unpacking it, because society has a norm. Society has impugned a norm to us. And that journey of being able, and there's no right or wrong answer. I think first and foremost, we are all unique. There's no right or wrong way to do it for you. How can it be wrong and you are unique? So you have your own unique path. It is okay if it doesn't look like everybody else's. But I think investing in yourself is the best thing you can do. It's a form of self-love. If you love yourself enough to allow someone to help you navigate the space. I don't necessarily like to tell women, do X, Y, and Z. That may not work for everybody. I think it is arrogant to assume that you have the answers for everyone when there are coaches out there that will specifically tailor a path, a journey, your history, your current financial circumstances, future circumstances will dictate a lot of what your options are realistically and theoretically. So I think every woman should have a career coach, whether it's a formal life coach, or every female lawyer, I would say at some point in your life, at some point in the journey, preferably in the beginning. But at some point when things start to feel strange, you need to be able to help and have someone help you navigate that. It's great to have sponsors. There's a difference between a mentor and a sponsor, but sometimes it's hard to find that when intersectionality exists. And oftentimes, I do a little bit of coaching for mentors, because sometimes mentors can have an agenda. Like my mentor had an agenda, and his agenda was for me to be his protege. And when I didn't live up to that part because I injected my femininity and had a child, it's my uterus, but whatever. When I chose to do that, it became an issue. So I think it's very critical for you to have mentors and sponsors. The difference between, obviously we know, difference between a mentor is someone who will tell you what you need to do. Sponsors are people who will tell you not only what you need to do, but then do something actionable to make that happen. And we need those type of people in our lives. But I would say look broadly, because they may not necessarily be at your job. Networking is key. Your network and the people that you surround yourself with are extremely important. And sometimes you have to pay for that help in the form of a coach, and look at it as investing in yourself, because it will help you to at least forge the path of getting clarity on what it is that you even need to look for in your own relationships professionally.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. I couldn't agree with you more. And I have to say, Juanita, I mean, you have been involved with women in the law, and specifically, you've been nominated for the Women in the Law Awards.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the initiative that is behind the Women in the Law Awards?
I absolutely love it. I think it is very timely. First of all, it's an honor to be nominated alongside some really, I mean, I am fangirling over some of these nominees who are just outstanding. It is beautiful to be able to celebrate women doing such great work, and to read some of the reviews of how people have been impacted by the work that we do. It's just phenomenal. I think that we don't celebrate us enough. Women contribute so much to every environment that we exist in. And so having a platform that specifically highlights, even, regardless of who wins, it's just nice to be able to be on a platform to clap for one another. And, success and sisterhood is synonymous. So I think that it is powerful to have this platform. It is just something that is long overdue. I'm so excited to be a part of it. So excited to supported, and excited because it will continue to have the ability to be a catalyst for these type of dialogues that we need to have with each other, because it is stressful and straining sometimes to be a woman and to be an attorney and to be a partner or a wife or a mother, aunt, sister, grandmother. You know, we play so many roles, both personal and professional. I coach a lot of women through Dress for Success and the affiliates that I run. I highlight a lot of women with my own award ceremony. So I get it. It's a lot of work. My hat goes off to everyone behind the scenes because it's a lot to produce this type of event. And I'm just really appreciative and grateful for the space, for the platform, and what you all are doing to really create sort of, like I said, a sisterhood for success in our profession.
Thank you so much, Juanita. I mean, the Women in the Law Awards can't exist without women like you and without your type of work and how you are propelling the path forward, not just for yourself and for your clients and for those that you advocate, both in the law and your coaching clients, but also women that are coming behind you. So thank you. We can't do this without you. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your inspiration and your wisdom as well. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to chat with you. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everything that you're doing and giving women like myself an opportunity to share. So thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.